So welcome to day 2 of my August 365 Pay It Forward talks here at Life Coach University. I'm Norma Frahn and I'm a life coach for weight loss. And today's talk will be all about normalizing food. But before we get started, just a quick reminder that your only cost of admission for these sessions is your promise to pay it forward with some act of kindness and really help us here at Life Coach University create a ripple of kindness all over the world. So as you're listening to my talk today on normalizing food, feel free to use the Q&A box. You'll find it right at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your questions there. And then at the end, I'll go through all of those questions and do my best to get you the answers you need to start moving forward with weight loss your way. So I want to dive right in to talk about food because it's probably the thing that is occupying more of your precious brain space than you'd like. And it's also an important part of learning how to lose weight your way. But before I do, I have a question for you. What is your relationship with food like today? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it a trusting one? Is it a shoulder to cry on? Is it a really contentious relationship? Are you afraid of food? Are you totally confused by it? Are you just plain sick and tired of having to think about it? So my relationship with food used to be all of those things, and maybe yours is too. But just like with any relationship with a person, it's the quality that's determined by the way we think about that relationship. And I'm willing to bet you might have a pretty dysfunctional relationship with food or you won't be here. I can tell you for sure that my own relationship with food was anything but normal when I started. So let me explain a little bit about what do I mean by normalizing food. I believe normalizing food means that we become empowered eaters. It means no longer looking externally for someone to tell us what to eat, when, and how much. We empower and trust ourselves to choose the food we eat because we enjoy it and it works well for our unique bodies. In the first day's talk, I shared a little bit about bio-individuality, and that basically means that we're all unique and we all have different needs when it comes to nutrition and food. And when we honor that and recognize that we're not going to find everything we need externally, we can really get to the place where we're empowered and we take control of our food. And not the other way around, where the food's controlling us. But most importantly, normalizing food means that we're no longer assigning morality to it. Food's not good or bad, it's just food. And our food choices do not make us morally a good or bad person, period, ever. Food sustains us, sustains our life as humans. And we have a primal instinct relative to food. Our bodies actually tell us what it needs most when we're tuned in and listening. Have you ever craved a great big steak? That's just a signal your body's throwing up that maybe you need some more protein. So part of normalizing food is learning to listen to your body. And I'm going to go into that much more in just a bit. So the effects of years of dieting and relying on someone else to tell us what to eat, when, and how much, we've just lost touch with our basic instincts and learned that we can't trust ourselves to make good decisions about food. In fact, it's likely that you may not even be sure if you can distinguish the feelings of real hunger or satisfaction anymore. Traditional dieting has taught us that we need to eliminate or restrict certain foods or entire food groups in order to lose weight, and that a constant state of hunger is required. And the net effect of all of that is we've unintentionally created a lot of food rules and labels for ourselves that we put on the food that we're eating. So most of us have this running good or bad food list in our heads and these are the labels that we put on food. A food is good if it's a diet food, and a food is bad because if we eat it, we won't lose weight. And if we eat the good food, we are good, and if we eat the bad food, somehow we're bad. We put ourselves through the ringer when it comes to our food choices in all of these labels. So I'm sure you've done this. How many times have you beat yourself up when you ate something from the bad food list? Said things to yourself like, what in the world is wrong with me? Why can't I do this? or you're never going to be able to get it right. All of those things I said to myself. And you probably measured your value of your day on whether or not you actually ate the salad you brought to work or tossed it out and went to Mexican with your friends. It's just incredible when we think about all the ways that we let food dictate how we feel and how we think about ourselves. So, to really start to kind of figure out how food is having this effect on your life, it's to think about this good and bad list that, frankly, I think we all have, especially if we've been someone that's dieted for a number of years. When you think about the foods on your good list today, are you excited to eat them? Or is it at least something you look forward to eating? Or do you dread it? That was my case. I dreaded most of the things that I ate because I felt I had to eat them. And it's so much easier to say yes to an invitation to lunch at the Mexican restaurant if all you have to eat is a baggie of carrots and celery sticks in the fridge with some nasty fat-free Franken dressing to dip them in. Do you see how we kind of do that to ourselves? We think that we're doing the right thing or the good thing, and it's kind of punishing. So, that idea of those carrot sticks and celery sticks might have sounded good at 6 a.m. when you packed your lunch, but not so much at 1 p.m. when you're hungry because you probably skipped breakfast. And on top of it, you hate carrots and celery sticks. And I feel compelled to say here, I'm using this comparison of the Mexican food. It's not a bad thing. I love Mexican food and I ate it the whole while I was losing my weight. But it's just this point that I'm trying to make, that we make choices that we don't even like, all for the sake of weight loss. And I'm not suggesting that every meal needs to be a party, and that you're eating, you're at least enjoying the foods that you eat, you actually like them, and not just because you think they're required to lose weight. All right. So how about food rules? If you've dieted for any amount of time, you're probably carrying around some rules that you don't even realize are there. I haven't been to a Weight Watchers meeting in probably 15 years, but I still calculate the points for an ear of corn every single time. For whatever reason, those 2 points have stayed in my brain, and I have to remind myself that no, we don't do that anymore. And if you're hungry, have a second ear of corn. Points don't matter. And then for years, now anybody that's near my age, around the 45 to 55 mark, you might remember this expression from the 90s. For years I believed that fat makes you fat. That ran through my head, and that came from the 1990s diet guru Susan Powter. And while now I look back, hindsight tells me that's wrong, that's been debunked. There was also some good things that came out of Susan Powter's work, but I don't want to get derailed. Do you know what made me decide to finally pull the trigger on my own weight loss coach 5 years ago? I heard her say in a podcast that your body needs fat and that full fat salad dressing was perfectly fine to eat. Like, what? I had been choking down that nasty low fat or fat free dressing since 1993. And needless to say, this woman had me at full fat. And I didn't turn back. I started eating full fat salad dressing and I lost over 100 pounds. I totally set aside that crazy diet rule I had in my head that fat makes you fat. And I learned through this process that no, your body actually needs fat. So the point here is question your diet rules. Here's another one I carried around for a long time. Baked potatoes are bad. I can't even tell you where I came up with that one. But I truly lived in mortal fear of a freaking baked potato for years. And you know how I eat them now? With butter, because everything's better with butter, and sour cream, full fat sour cream. And I lost over 100 pounds doing that. So, how do you start to normalize food and create a better relationship with it? Before I can really dive into the how, I want to make one thing really clear because it's an important point. Learning to normalize food takes time. I said it in my talk yesterday. This is not a quick fix. It takes work and a willingness to experiment. You probably have a lot of emotions and thoughts and really deeply ingrained behaviors around food, and that's going to take some time to unwind. Weight loss your way is a long game because you're figuring out how to create sustainable long term results. And that means unwinding years or maybe even decades of thinking and behaviors. In fact, I think I would even I would even love it if I could convince you to let go of the idea of losing weight while you're in the early stages of normalizing food. I know you heard me right. Give yourself the time and space for a little weight loss break. An important part of this process is releasing the judgment of food and of yourself. I've just found that that's really, really hard to do if you're trying to create weight loss and at the same time. It's really okay to put weight loss aside just for a bit, I promise. And I know it feels scary, but you will be so glad that you did. Spend some time on this. Maybe do a little bit of journaling or think about being okay without a definitive timeline. One of the biggest lies that we've been conditioned to believe is that weight loss is somehow time bound. you know, Gosh, again, going back to my 90s, thin thighs in 30 days and lose 10 pounds in, 2 weeks. It's just not true. And it's different for everybody. Again, back to that bio individuality. It's especially true when we're working on normalizing food. But I do promise you this, taking the time up front to kind of get good with food is going to speed everything up for you going forward. All right, so let's talk about the first step. What do you need to do first to start this process of normalizing food? Excuse me. So, the first step is awareness. And in fact, I'd argue that it's a requirement. You may have heard it called meeting yourself where you're at. You have to understand where you're starting from in order to take the first step, kind of like a GPS. The first thing it does is find your current location so it can map out the best route. And that's exactly what you're going to be doing as you become more aware of your current relationship with food. Now, a good place to start exploring and gaining more awareness is that good and bad food list that we all have. We all have one, whether you know it or not. It's subtly running in the background, and for some of us, probably not so subtly. So let's bring it out into the light and really examine it. Now, here's something that you can do, or at least start to do maybe while I'm talking, or you can do it later, but I strongly encourage you to do this. Just grab a piece of paper, draw a line straight down the middle, and label the two columns good and bad, and start writing your good or bad foods. Now, just remember, we're not talking about good and bad in the sense of nutritional value yet. We're just getting clear on how you currently are labeling food relative to weight loss. Now, really take your time on this and give it some thought. And once you have your list, go back and circle or highlight all the foods that you actually like and enjoy eating. And what I think you're going to find is that most of the foods on your bad list are the things that you actually like. You're going to have more things on the bad list circled than the good list. And that's perfectly normal. And it happens all the time. And in fact, I think it's pretty telling, right? If we're spending a lot of time over here eating these foods that we think are good and we don't even like them, how in the world can we have a normal relationship with food? Okay, so you've done your good list and your bad list. You've circled the foods you actually like. Maybe you found that most of them are on what you currently think of as your bad list. Now I want you to create another list. Just flip your paper over or start a new page and call it the foods I enjoy eating list. And then just transfer all those circled or highlighted foods to that list and then spend some time adding to it. I'm sure there's tons that you didn't even think of. Make an exhaustive list of everything you enjoy eating with no judgment or attachment to weight loss. Just think about the foods that give you joy when you eat them. The foods that you may not think of as something that you could work into a weight loss process. We're not worrying about that right now. We're just making this list of foods you actually enjoy. All right, the last step, and this is the big one. I want you to practice eating those foods without shame, without guilt, and without judgment. Experience enjoyment, experience tastes and textures, and notice how different foods react in your body. Really spend time here and take some notes. You're going to be so grateful that you're going to have all of this data that you collect in these early stages. And a week or two is a really great start, but if you could take maybe even a full 30 days to really experiment, I promise a whole new world is going to open up for you. And when you're taking your notes and eating these foods that were once scary or on your bad list, pay attention to what happens. Pay attention to how much you actually do enjoy it. Maybe you'll find that, this food that I thought was taboo and off limits, that I craved all the time, maybe it's not as great as I thought it was. Or you might find that, wow, I've really been missing out on a lot of things that I enjoy. So take some notes, just get really, really comfortable with how you're thinking about the food as you're eating it. So here's what's going to happen. I promise you this will happen. When you start experimenting and practicing, your brain is going to throw a huge hissy fit. And that's exactly why I suggested you try to put weight loss aside during this process. Your brain's only job is to seek pleasure, avoid discomfort, and do it both as efficiently as possible. And change is dangerous to your brain, even when it's something that you want and it's good for you. It just sees that familiar way of eating is being challenged, and it cannot have that. The chatter's going to start, the self doubt's going to creep in, but please stay the course. Your lovely brain is just doing what it was designed to do. So be on the lookout for this. Like I said, it will likely happen, especially if you really embrace this and you really practice eating some of those foods that maybe you once feared, or you have a deep belief that it's just not possible to eat them and lose weight. But when this does happen, just calmly and gently remind your brain that, no, don't worry, we're just experimenting. There's nothing to get cooked out about here. Just roll with me. Keep it light and judgment free as best you can. Because what will happen if you respond in a way that's uh, resistant, like, this shouldn't be happening and I can't stand that this is happening, I just want it to stop, you're actually making it worse. So the more calmly you can experience those crazy brain chatters that are going to happen, and the more calmly you can just say, just go over here for a minute, let me keep going, we're going to be fine. It sounds silly, but it actually will calm your brain down and give you more space to experience eating the different foods that maybe once scared you a little bit. So notice your thoughts as you do this. Again, write these down somewhere and then go back to them and really look at them. And remember from the first talk, I mentioned this little test you can give yourself. Is it kind? Is it true? And is it helpful? Take a look at and ask yourself those things as you're thinking about these different foods. All right, so I know what might be running through your head right now. Even though I asked you to try to set aside weight loss and that it will actually benefit you in the long run, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, if I eat what I want, I'm going to gain weight. Well, the truth is you might, and that's okay. This is where I need you to trust me and trust yourself. Part of figuring out weight loss your way is learning what foods actually work in your body and in what quantity and what doesn't. And that requires experimenting. And yes, you might experience a little weight gain, but you might also experience a loss. And really, truly, at this point, it's just not that important. What's important is learning how to eat in a way that you like and start to understand how different foods react and feel in your body. You cannot make informed decisions about your food without doing this work. It is so important. And this is exactly why other people's diets and meal plans usually don't work. So let me give you an example. When I first started, I knew I loved pastas and breads, and I wanted to incorporate them in my diet. But I also knew that these foods spiked my blood sugar very quickly. I was a type 2 diabetic. So I experimented. I didn't eat those things for 2 or 3 days at a time, and my blood sugar drastically dropped. Kind of amazing. My doctors have been telling me this for years. And the other thing I noticed when I stopped eating pastas and breads for a few days, my joints weren't as stiff. When I get up in the morning, I felt like I could actually walk and not have to like ease my way into moving. And then I waited a few more days and I tested my theory and I started to eat those things again. And bam, my blood sugar skyrocketed. And the next day I woke up because I had so much inflammation. So I kept experimenting and I finally figured out how to still eat those things without creating the negative effects I didn't want. I learned that my body could tolerate a pasta based dinner about once a week, and it could tolerate a sandwich with white bread about the same, maybe once a week or maybe twice a week. So I figured out a way to still have those foods, still, and I still got to enjoy them without all of that other stuff that came along when I was eating too much of them. So I didn't rip them out of my diet and just say, nope, I'm never going to eat pasta or bread again. I figured out a way to make it work. And that required some experimenting. Same thing happened with desserts. I'm probably just like anybody else. I love a good quality dessert. But again, same negative effects blood sugar spikes that hung around a little too long and tons of inflammation. So I learned through that process that not only is it pasta and bread, but it's also sugar. But once I did a little experimenting and figured out that I could allow for a nice decadent dessert without all the negative side effects about once a week. And I thought that was great news because I didn't have to give up all of those things, compromise my health, and just rip them out of my life. I was found a way to incorporate them in a way that didn't cause all of these other problems. And what happens as you start to do this work and you start to get more and more aware of how you want to eat, what works, what you like, you start building what I call an eating protocol. And it's a protocol that feels good and works for your body. So, as you're experimenting with food and getting more comfortable eating things that you may have considered bad, also pay attention to things like your energy levels and brain fog. Food has a huge impact on these two areas. You may find that a bigger breakfast really suits you. And maybe that kind of goes against all the food rules that you know. But if that suits you, do it. And maybe you'll find that you don't necessarily get those late afternoon energy crashes when you add a little more protein to your lunch. It's just really fascinating when I really embraced this work and paid attention to how food impacted my life and how I showed up in it. So, what I would encourage you to do while you're running your personal food experiments, keep a log or a journal. I am telling you, this data that you collect during this process is going to prove invaluable when you're ready to start dialing in your own food protocols and eventually start leveling up your food protocols. Remind yourself as often as necessary that it's just data. You don't need to judge it or fudge it. Has anybody done this in the past? I used to judge my data so hard that I fudged it to make it look better. But for who? I was the only one seeing it. But I was making it mean something about me. So I pretend it didn't happen by not writing it down. And I try really, but and I then I wouldn't have to look at it and deal with it. So try super hard not to do that. Just remind yourself it's just data. It doesn't mean anything about you because it's just not helpful. And if you catch yourself doing it, just stop and ask yourself why. There's some judgment in there about the food or about you that's really worth digging into. Those are your clues along the way as you do this. Because what's really happening is the judgment is truly self sabotaging your own awareness. All right, so I have covered a lot. So let's recap a little bit. First and foremost, food cannot pass moral judgment on you. Your food choices do not mean anything other than what you decided in that moment to put in your mouth. And we all have a good and bad food list. And many of us are probably eating foods that we don't even like because we think it's necessary to lose weight. But to figure out where you need to start from, your GPS location, a great way to do that is to make your own good and bad list and see where you are today. And then build out your exhaustive list of foods you actually enjoy, and then go eat them. Practice eating the things that scare you. Practice breaking those old, outdated diet rules you've been carrying around like a heavy backpack. And keep some notes on what you notice when you eat those foods, how they work in your body, and maybe some initial thoughts on what you might want to experiment with next. And most of all, allow yourself to experience the freedom of eating without guilt or shame and the freedom from thinking about food all the time. And then remember what I said about this all just takes time. Really be willing to take the time to explore this. I hear this all the time from my clients. Norma, I tried this for a week, but it's not working. Or I'm still worried about eating the bad foods. My friends, it's going to take as long as it takes, and a week is rarely long enough. Heck, a month or two is probably not quite long enough, but it's certainly enough time to really start collecting some good data. It truly is a process of unwinding years or maybe decades of thinking and habits. And I'll tell you this, I lost every single pound of my weight on the back of small, incremental baby steps and a whole lot of experimentation. We're just getting started. So give yourself some grace and some space. Weight loss your way looks different for everyone. So give yourself the gift of curiosity and a willingness to consider things that might be wildly different from what you've ever done, because that's where change happens. All right, I hope you found this helpful today and you're ready to really dive in and get some of that great awareness around your current thoughts about the food. So, we're going to dive into and connect the pieces a little bit tomorrow with the topic of emotional eating. So I encourage you to come back tomorrow. And before we do that, though, let me move my screen over and we're going to see what questions we have. All right. The first one, I think it's a comment. I love this approach to food, letting go of the should or shouldn't eating mindset. Yeah, this is a big one. And I think this is the one that everybody, myself included, have really struggled with. And it all goes back to somewhere, somehow, we started listening to people and their diets and their programs totally external to us. And we stopped trusting ourselves. And when you can start pulling that back a little bit and experimenting, it is amazing how much of a world will open up to you. Because truly, think about it. Any of those diets that we've done in the past, somebody else made that up. Now, it might work for them, it might work for your best friend, but maybe it doesn't work for you. And that's okay because we're all individuals. Okay, the next one. I got a huge aha just now. This is just like going on a mindset diet. What thoughts and beliefs can I let go of? Yes, exactly. I'm going on a thought diet like fat makes you fat, or this food is bad, or even the thought I should lose weight. Oh my gosh, yes, that is exactly it. It's about questioning those thoughts. And I love how you've connected that to the thought of like going on a thought diet. Finding those thoughts in this process that just don't serve you, or those things that you believe to be true for so long, being willing to step back and question them. Is that really true? Or is that just something somebody said, I grabbed onto and I ran with it for however long? But you can let all of that go and you can create new beliefs through this process. So good. I'm so glad you had that aha moment. All right. The next one says, when I eat foods and others staring at me, I worry so much about what they think of me. I hide eating the bad foods in front of other people. Oh my goodness, I can so relate to this. Do you know one of my worst nightmares was having to go out on a business dinner with my colleagues? I dreaded it. And it was such a mental manipulation of figuring out how to place myself in the line as we walked to the table so I could get to the seat that allowed the quickest exit and I didn't have to squeeze past and then worrying about what everybody else was ordering so that I could figure out what I would order so I would blend in and nobody would notice. Oh my gosh. If there's one thing that oh gosh, this is the thing I solved that literally changed my life. It sounds so silly, but I totally understand where you're coming from. But here's what happens when you work on normalizing food and you really deeply understand and believe that those choices that you make are yours and yours alone. You can start to separate a little bit from that worrying about what other people think. And this too is a process. And we're going to cover this quite a bit more in the emotional eating talk tomorrow. But it starts with you being comfortable with your choices. And I promise, when you do get to that place, suddenly it just doesn't matter so much what other people are thinking. And what I really learned is that I put so much pressure on myself worrying about what I ordered and what they thought of what I ordered, and dare I have dessert because I'm the fat girl at the table. Once I got comfortable with my food choices, I realized that they weren't really even thinking all of that. They didn't care. Nobody was paying attention. Nobody really cared. It's hard to believe because we feel it so deeply in that moment, but it starts to go away when you yourself become much more comfortable with the choices that you make. So I would encourage you to do this work. And I am sorry that you're feeling this because I know how painful it can be, but it also can be an amazing experience. And that all starts with this process of normalizing food. All right. So another question I get quite often, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier on about trying to let go of this idea of actual weight loss. And, I've heard people say to me, well, why can't I just eat healthy food? Be really careful about that because at this stage, when you're just starting, healthy food doesn't always equate to a good and bad list. Healthy food is sometimes, we think of it as like I mentioned, the celery and carrot sticks and that kind of thing. And we forget that the most important thing is that you enjoy your food and it works in your body. And just because something you might be labeling as healthy, it might not be something you like. And then we start pushing ourselves to eat those healthy things. Let's let that evolve. The nutritional value of your food will naturally evolve as you start to become more comfortable with just eating, with eating foods that you enjoy. And I promise you will get to a point where you're going to say, I think I'm ready to start adding more vegetables. How can I get a vegetable in at breakfast? How can I make an omelet with vegetables? It's a natural evolution, and you'll know when you're ready to start making those changes because your body's going to tell you. Your thoughts are going to tell you. You're going to get really comfortable with eating different foods, and truly one day you're just going to decide, I think I'm ready to level up that a little bit. Let's add a vegetable. Let's add some more water into the day. It's just a natural output of doing this work. So, so important. All right. I think we have gotten through the questions. And as I said, I invite you to join me tomorrow where I'm going to dive into emotional eating. This is a topic that kind of dovetails beautifully with this because not only do we have to think about foods we like and foods we enjoy, but to really kind of unwind this relationship that we have today, we have to know how we're using food as a means of coping with our emotions. So, really excited to share that with you tomorrow. And a reminder, so go out in the world and pay it forward. If something here felt good and resonated with you, please head on out into the world and share it with somebody. Hold a door for somebody. Tell someone they look wonderful today. Doesn't matter what it is. Just spread the love and the kindness by paying it forward. All right. I will see you tomorrow for day 3. Bye bye.